Are we ready? Can I proceed? Because we were actually waiting for a feedback from the rest of you. First, on my behalf and that of the UDA party and secretariat, I want to welcome you to the party. You will realize my business usually is not calling press conferences. We act more and have the various delivery of the UDA government and Kenya Kwanza speak for itself. But today, because of this continued choreography of fairly heartbreaking events, we felt it necessary to have this press conference and speak to some of the inherent issues facing us as a nation and give our position as a party, which is also, by extension, our position as a government. I'm joined here by all the directors of the UDA party, represented by Brian Bugwa, who is the Deputy Executive Director, Director Margaret, Director Sam, Director Mulo, Director Grace, Director Halake, Director Nathaniel, and Director Gilo, who is familiar to all of you. So this is our UDA statement on the violent protests, looting, and destruction of property of yesterday, Wednesday, 25th June 2025. The UDA party unequivocally affirms the constitutional rights of all Kenyans to assemble and to protest peacefully. These rights are enshrined in Chapter 4 of our Constitution, must be promoted and protected with utmost zeal and commitment. Equally though, the constitutional mandate of any government is to not only protect the rights of its citizens, but also preserve the political stability of the nation, where by creating an environment for the enjoyment of these rights. Further, never and never can anyone purport to invoke rights provided for in the Constitution to attain unconstitutional objectives and provide a veil of cover, sanitizing criminality, including wanton destruction of property, looting, and a vivid affront towards attempting the collapse of the state and government and to precipitate a climate of anarchy. The violence resulting to the destruction of property, including public infrastructure, unabated looting, arson, and sadly rape, a new law in Kenya's protest history, guised as a human rights agenda through either innocent or conscious complicity of Kenya's human rights community, has irked my and our consciousness immensely. A continuous charade to mobilize mayhem and or provide cover for mayhem, quoted under the flavor of rights agitation, occasioning significant loss of lives and livelihoods, as witnessed yesterday and in the past, is no longer tenable. The government will assert its absolute duty to protect, to ensure that such carnage is never again witnessed under the guise of human rights or by the Gen Zs. This violence has been a culmination of prolonged, unchecked, deliberate and serial incitement, which some of you regard as freedom of expression, by individuals and part of the mainstream media through perverse narratives of shareholding, contesting the inclusion of all Kenyans of all extractions, no matter how inconsequential they might appear, into various spheres of our national life. the inclusion of all Kenyans, to the exclusion of none, and a fair and equitable spread of development to all corners of 60 years ago. The national project of building a modern and inclusive Kenya by His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto and Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga, together with Excellency Professor Kithure Kindiki and other courageous sons and daughters of the soil, to include Her Excellency Governor Mbarire, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, Honorable Eric Wamumbi, Honorable Betty Maina, among others, gallant Kenyans, is neither negotiable nor reversible. The coalition of the willing is a high calling of our leadership to eternally put to rest the injustices, inequalities, and the exclusion meted out by a combined 50 years of Kenya's ruling oligarchy. It is by no means a coincidence that the oligarchs and their collaborators who own Kenya's mainstream media not only oppose President Ruto's bid for president, but have deliberately attempted to undermine his transformative agenda with little success. To further sabotage the national project, the oligarchs-owned media, with their collaborators, have continued to vilify Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga for closing ranks with President Ruto. Their fodder for survival, dominance, and continuity preys on malice, hatred, and division, and a continued disenfranchisement of others to create a perpetual, let me repeat that. Their fodder for survival, dominance, and continuity preys on malice, hatred, and division, and a continued disenfranchisement of others to create and perpetuate artificial minorities and an enduring class of the poor. While the media has a choice to undermine and sabotage the national project and vilify everything William Ruto, undermining the security of the state and the unity of the nation is a choice you don't have. We reiterate our call to exercise responsibility. We seek no favors, but urge responsibility, recognizing that the rights provided for do not exist in absolutism, and the ultimate duty to preserve the unity, security, and continuity of the nation rests with the state. Equally, no Kenyan or leader has a choice or latitude to incite others to destruction and disorder. Under the leadership of His Excellency President William Ruto, the state will remain strong as Commander-in-Chief, and the nation shall remain one and indivisible under the national project of an inclusive and fair government under God. We commend our police officers who exhibited enormous courage and restraint at the face of violent Gen Zs and opportunistic mobs. A number of them endured physical assault and injury by protesters whose intentions were not peaceful. We urge and encourage them to continue to maintain law and order and to protect the lives and properties of the innocent, law-abiding Kenyans. We convey our sympathies and solidarity with all those who lost their livelihoods and all other victims of the mayhem. Everything possible will be done to bring organizers and financiers of the violence, looting, and destruction to book. To the larger part of Kenya, who are peaceful and support the government, a government for all Kenyans, asanteni sana, to you, and God bless you. Signed by Hassan Omar, Secretary General. That's the written text. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Mama Kedis. I'm 17. It sounds like you're praising the police for yesterday night was lost. The protesters were coming out basically for commemoration. Yet people were shot to death.
Which country do you live in?
I live in Kenya.
Did you see the mayhem and the destruction? Is that how you commemorate?
So my question is,
Yeah.
We saw yesterday the protest in Mombasa, they were largely peaceful. Police cooperated. Now, yesterday in Nairobi, things were not the same.
But it was NTV that immediately went off air when a policewoman was being brutalized. They started the violence. My young friend, don't destroy this country. You will find that there's no other place to live in. You vilify these men and women. When they are wrong, they are wrong. But you don't set out to assault them. You don't set out to destroy property. They had closed into the CBD. Look at the looting that happened. Look at the people who are just starting off in life, how the looting has devastated their livelihoods. If you're commemorating, why are you commemorating burning and looting supermarkets? A swath of deliberate acts of gangsterism, hooliganism, destruction, violence. It's unacceptable. So, what you see is from our eyes, because you think, you know, we have said here, media has been a perpetrator or complicit to these actions. I was myself a student leader who led protests in this country. We knew our limitations. We didn't ridicule the police. We went back home. And we got what we wanted. Section 2A was repealed. A new constitutional framework was put in order. The abuse of that constitutional framework will lead you to anarchy. So you come on all the time of vilifying. You've never talked about the destruction. You don't talk about the kind of human loss and other kind of transgressions that were committed. You see, there is a need also, if yesterday the police were not there at all, I think some parts of this country will have been burnt and razed down to the ground. And it is anger within a certain region that is fairly personal. And I think we've all seen anger before, but it has not been that personalized. People have demonstrated, people have rioted in the past, but to personalize anger to that extent is just unfair.
My name is Sidney. I want to agree with you that there was destruction. There was mayhem, some lives were lost, injuries everywhere. And everyone has to take part of the blame. And that includes the civil society, it includes the Gen Zs, it includes the police, it includes you as the ruling class. And this is my question.
Mm-hmm. Can I have some water?
There was a period of almost a year coming into this commemoration where there were certain issues that were raised and that needed some addressing. And part of the reasons why some of the people who are coming to the streets are saying that they've seen a completely U-turn on what they were agitating for. My question is, as much as you say that this appears to be some sort of anger in a particular region, doesn't this speak to a social, economical issue that is yet to be addressed by the government?
The fact that there is unemployment in this country is evident. The fact that the economy we literally had to resuscitate the economy from the scratch is evident. Last time, when the genuine Gen Zs, because this has become opportunistic now, I can say this in public, even some of our own young relatives last year thought that there were taxes that were oppressive. His Excellency William Ruto went and said, I concede. He said, I concede, and he withdrew the finance bill. Immediately he withdrew the finance bill, the agenda shifted. So suddenly, so many extraneous issues were introduced. Sijui go where, sijui fanya nini. There's only one way for a president to go, through a democratic election. That's the only way that this Constitution of Kenya has provided. The duty, therefore, I can tell you this. William Ruto, for those who think that they can come to State House or Sijui, will not leave because you have come with a demo. If you really are genuine about this agitation, have an election in 2027.
The socio-economic issues, have they been addressed?
When we took over, there are things we pledged, isn't it? We said, first and foremost, we wanted to stabilize the economy by stabilizing the cost of living. So what do? We decided to cut subsidies on consumption and subsidize production through the fertilizer program. By God's grace, some of you laughed at people, Muslims and Christians, when they went to pray. God has blessed us with rains. Based on that, now we have something called security of supply. The rains blessed us, we've been harvesting, and therefore, just a minute. And therefore, the cost of living was stabilized. The dollar, through the G2G, to cut the demand on the dollar, we were able to take a deferred credit of about six months, ensuring that there was $3 billion in circulation to cap the demand of the dollar that is usually mopped up by people within the space of importers of fuel. When we stabilize the dollar, means our imports, especially in terms of edible oil and other food products, also was able to come down. We were able to ensure that we don't import sugar as a country. So therefore, inflation today is below 3%. So therefore, those were the sum of the stabilization. We did not default on our sovereign obligation. We have effected SHIF or SHA for that matter. You might say the much you want, but those who've gone to the hospitals, they've seen it work firsthand. We have gone and implemented the housing programs. People in Mukuru and other areas have been handed over keys to their housing. So these things have been progressive and incremental. But there is a deliberate attempt by people who want to see nothing, hear nothing, to paint evil and vilify. It's personal. So therefore, we don't mind. Use your vote in 2027. But don't come to the streets to destroy Kenya. That's what we're asking. You destroy public infrastructure. Sisi hatujafikiwa. Northeastern hakujajengwa. Busia hakuna. Kila mahali hakuna. Nyinyi mumejengewa, mumechoma. Sasa sisi ni viongozi wa hiyo mahali. Turegeshe hiyo mlichoma ama sisi tuende tuseme zetu pia zijengwe mwanzo, alafu tuwarudie baadaye. You know, there's common sense when you destroy public infrastructure. We have been marginalized. It's a reality. My cousins got IDs for the first time in the last 2 months. Anaambiwa alete sijui basi ya babu, ya nyanya, ya aunti, ya shangazi. Sijui waende walete barua sijui ya kasisi, ya kanisa, ya nani. You know, this msikiti, imam. How do you treat Kenyans like that? You create them into an artificial minority. Now they are registering, their numbers are soaring. You'll see that in the election. It's not a joke. So my brother, some of the socio-economic issues are being addressed, and the impact is felt. That's why other areas were fairly peaceful.
When I asked you, Kio Macharia from K24 TV, one outstanding point you've mentioned is the pact between the broad-based government you've highlighted and the pact between the government and the academia.
Yeah.
You both called people like peace and wisdom. When we were signing the memorandum of understanding, one of the key points was to protect the livelihood of Kenyans and speed up the wheels of justice to ensure the families of those affected got justice. However, 1 year down the line, the very MOU of understanding, point number 4 specifically, has been blatantly violated. On Sunday, we saw the mother of one of the victims that was shot last year admitting on camera that 1 year down the line, she has never gotten nothing. And the head of state reached out and told her they're going to help her get justice, but she says
nothing has been done. Recently, we've seen the murder of Albert Ojwang. Shortly after, we come and see Boniface Kariuki shot dead, and a non protester. What is your stance about this happening?
This government has never condoned killing. And a significant number of those matters are beyond the hands of some of the policymakers. They're in investigative agencies. And you know, you forget my history, my brother. I was in the human rights community. During Kibaki's era, in a span of 5 to 6 months, 700 young Kikuyu men putting on 2 underwears were killed under the pretext of Mungiki. And some of those investigations, because it's murder which lacks statute of limitation, are still matters before competent authorities for investigations. Some of these matters, sadly, are under investigations, and I have asked some of those questions to some of the investigative authorities. Others have been dealt with swiftly, Albert Kariuki. The one of Muriuki you're talking about, there's a suspect in court, or in custody. Others have not been dealt with as swiftly. But it is justice being sought, and it will be found. So to constitute commemoration doesn't mean you come and break property and show some outrage that is beyond measure in terms of infringing on the rights of others. So you've destroyed property. You have burnt public property. You have vandalized banks. You have vandalized supermarkets. You have stolen everything in there. So that's good for commemoration.
Well explained, but don't you think this paints the picture of the government having a culture of life? What do you have to say about that?
That's your opinion. You see, you are the ones who keep seeing lies. But those of us who are promised IDs, which for 62 years, which you took for granted, are now getting. Those of us who were told we will be marginalized are now seeing roads, which you guys were mimicking. Sijui Tarbach, Nini, they're there. And we are going to take more debt. Infrastructure ifike kila mahali. I'm telling, that's the disappointing word. Haiwezekani tumefikiwa sisi tunaambiwa iko deni. Watoto wetu watakuja lipa hiyo deni ya ile barabara iliyojengwa katika maeneo mengine, na hii tunajenga sasa Western Kenya, Nyanza, Northern Kenya, Coast Region. Hizo barabara zote tutakuja accumulate. We cannot stifle our infrastructure ambition when it is the time for us to diversify our infrastructure, whatever. So what you've done is to, you said housing is a lie. You're not now saying how it's the truth. You kept saying SHA is a lie. You're not saying how now it's the truth. You said, Sijui, this is a lie, bringing down the cost of maize meal. Now you're not saying how it is the truth. We are getting used to it, because I think that those are part of the caricature of lies that complicit media has been actually trying to perpetuate. But the good thing is, Kenyans these days have various sources also of information. So the more accurate you become, the more credible you are. One day, I will ask you to access a research of how many Kenyans think you give government fair coverage, and you'll be surprised of the numbers.
Honestly, my name is Kevin. Two questions. One is about something you have said about anger from a certain region. Yesterday we saw the protests across at least in 7 counties, including Mombasa.
Mombasa, those who come from Mombasa here, those are professional demonstrators. Ukiwaambia umekataliwa kuoa, wanakuja. Ukisema bibi yako amekuacha, wana demonstrate. They are just 100. That's why the police just escorted them, because they know them. Wanawafikisha, wanarudi. Wewe bwana, wacha bwana. Mimi I come from Mombasa. Wewe hujui hizo teams za kina Haki, sijui kina nani. Those are professional demonstrators. I'm telling you. Sasa hivi, hebu mtu akunyang'anye hiyo jacket yako, I'll call them to demonstrate for you. Those are professionals bwana. Sasa the police know them very well. They take them round. Wanafika, jana hata wakaambiana, leo tuko off air, tunaweza bundu hapa, so tuishieni.
The last one, I've come from Nairobi, talking to businesses that were affected.
In Kisumu, they refused because they have had a lot of brand. iko kila mahali tunazijua.
Nimetoka here Nairobi, I've talked to protesters that whose businesses were affected, some were burnt, but most of them, and majority of them, 90% of them believe, this is their belief and this is their direct feedback.
That it is Sakaja.
No, they don't
Police
say
are
that,
not
they are saying
react.
names now.
Because I've heard it, I've seen it on the social
They
media.
are not saying names.
Mm.
They are saying that these are goods that were well planned. This includes the press statement that has just been given by MPs, UDAs and UDA MPs. Some of them say that wounds infiltrated the protests.
But I said it in my statement. You know, you also came when I read the statement. I called them opportunistic mobs. Mimi nimetumia kizungu.
So can you say they are... So, honestly, can you say there were Gen Zs who are honest protesters yesterday?
To be honest with you, I did see some. And those protests must continue. The ones that are organic, the ones that are genuine, but those ones that are opportunistic. Wale Gen Z wanakuja kulutu ma supermarket. Wale ma Gen Z sijui wanakuja kupigana na polisi. Wale ma Gen Z wanakuja kupiga polisi. Lakini wako wale wanaweka kwa live. Hao tu iko sawa, endelee tu. See, iko hao nimewaona quite a number of them. So I saw quite a number of them also. Some of you here included. I have seen one or two of you who are anchors. I saw them wamevaa kibandana na wamevaa makenya, waka create content, wakaipush. Content creation is today one of the most important things. Hata unaweza lipwa nayo. So, but I've seen it personally. So there were some genuine Gen Zs who came in. Athenge pia nikamwona. He was my classmate. I never saw him in demonstrations when I was in the university, but jana nikamwona yeye na Nameless na Wahu. So wako sawa pia. Unajua sisi tulidemonstrate tukiwa vijana, wengine wana demonstrate uzeeni.
Ya mwisho tu.
Number two?
Let me talk up to that. Is it not disturbing to hear you speak of the fact that there are financials to this and perhaps issues that could be illustrating this whole thing, and you're promising us on camera that the government is going to do everything in their power to ensure that they're brought to book? What happens to the security apparatus that could have intercepted, that could have, gotten the intelligence about these matters? And as far as we all know, the stories of us having a deliberation on the 25th were all out here. Are we talking of a government that is admitting that they have failed Kenyans, and now you want us as media to come in and paint a different picture? Because we literally, as well, point fingers at us. And in my assumption, we are not supposed to be speaking of what it is that government has done. Government has communication entities that are supposed to be doing that.
But then the government tried to arrest some of those financiers. People were out in the streets mobilizing, distributing money. So suddenly, there is a very, kila mtu siku hizi akishikwa, anasema ni haki yake, haizi shikwa, ana create content. You know, one of the things we have stifled significantly, application of the rule of law, is this overemphasis that even in rightful protests and in the lawful cause of duty where the police is arresting someone for a lawful cause. Nimeona watu wanapiga nduru. There's a day, it might have been a member of my community, and I told people, watu wameenda kuzuia construction yake. It is illegal. It has no, the various licensing and authorizations. Before he realized, he turned it into a rights issue. And everybody is taking a video trying to humiliate the police officers and the law enforcement agency or those institutions. We have turned everything in this country as a circus. We don't know at what point we will stop and allow law enforcement to take charge or to take cause. You asked a question? You know,
My second question, sir, is about, is the government also planning on compensation, or is there a way they're planning on helping the business people that were looted? So, is there an initiative around it?
that one I'll have, the second question, that one I will have to coordinate and liaise with Kipchumba Murkomen and other agencies to know the plans. It will be desirable. I hope there are ways in which government can afford some level of afweni to some of these people. I saw some of those who were, I know one of the ladies actually. I could see she was distraught. I even had to call her. She was broken down. She told me that her stock was about 1.2 million. It was her livelihood, her life investment, plowing it back and again and again and again. You know, right now, everybody has a right to protest. But wajua kuna kuja hawa ndugu zetu wa civil society. Wanachora ile mangumi hivi. Nasema sisi leo take over, shut down. And probably they are genuine. In fact, some of them, apart from the drawings, they will not be able to shut down. Even there are many, many things. They want to come in and show some anger. But what they are doing, when they do that, there's some opportunistic elements. So now, you know, that's where now there's that lack of dichotomy. So I think what they need to do, that's what we used to do, by the way. And maybe siku hizi watu wanaona, we will prescribe even the route. Tutatoka Nation Center, because I can see hapo ni epicenter ya meeting. Tutatoka Nation Center, tutembee mpaka hapa na hapa. Designate the routes, anything beyond. It's not weakness. We demonstrated, those of you who are a bit senior journalists, you covered me demonstrating. We will tell them today we are demonstrating against this issue. We'll go to the Ministry of Education, tutapita hapo, tutapresent memorandum, tutaenda. And we'll be escorted to the Ministry of Education. The only thing that used to capture the country's imagination is how you present your memorandum. Tutasema leo, tumesema hapana, this was a wrongful killing. Tutaenda Vigilance House, tutatoa petition yetu, atashuka spokesman, yule Owino, anachukua. Tunaenda wapi? But now when you say anarchy, shut down, you escalate and exacerbate the situation, there is then a mixture of the genuine ones and the opportunistic ones. But then again now, the genuine ones, they're also not fools. Wakiona tu imechange, wanachomoka. How are you able to write on a face of someone when I see you and I see another one? How am I supposed to say you're not a genuine demonstrator and the other one is? It only is evident when some are beating the police and stealing. So now you stop those ones. And by the time that happens, by the way, the genuine ones wamechomoka. Wamechukua content, wameweka, wamepost, wameenda. That would be the last one.
Yes, my name is Brian Garanja from NTV. There are constant concerns from Kenyans that the government, UDA here is the ruling party, is not addressing the issue. We are addressing symptoms. We are addressing what happened in protests. Whereas these protests ought not to have happened had this government addressed what Kenyans raised in last year's protests. Kenyans spoke about abductions, for instance, throughout the year. We have seen it still happening under UDA's ruling party. Kenyans spoke about impunity and the fact that leaders allied to UDA are showing us opulence. It went down after last year's protests, came back up. When are you going to address the issues and run away from apportioning blame that this is happening because of this? When will the Kenya Kwanza government, the UDA government, address, like, Kenyans, indeed, this is what is paining you and this is how we are addressing it?
The president made a commitment, firm commitment against extrajudicial executions. He has made a firm commitment against the abductions. And a significant part of the abductions were conclusively dealt with. So, we are not even asking Kenyans not to protest. It's eternal vigilance to keep our democracy vibrant and sustainable. These are affords of the Constitution. But we are telling you what is not acceptable is to come into town and start looting property and to start breaking into shops. That's why I was telling my dear sister there from TV47 that legitimate protests must be allowed. And she's asking, how can the legitimate protesters be organized? And I gave one of the ways we organized ourselves by even giving the route for the protestation and the areas that we were going to stop. And police gave us escorts. And mind you, that was the Moi regime. But you know, when you make it haphazard, sijui yule anaingilia huku, sijui kuna group inakuja kutoka Thika Road, sijui nyingine inakuja Kiambu Road, sijui nyingine inasema Occupy, you create a confusion yourself. Your issues are lost. And therefore then, there's an eruption because you have to protect property, you have to protect lives. So my brother, it's not the right to protest that is being diminished. It is not the eternal vigilance of the Kenyan people that we are against, but we are against the continued incitement, the continued incitement of the media, the continued incitement by political leaders. You carry their speeches. Where is the responsibility? Where is journalism? Where is the responsibility? Can't you tell when this guy is talking about shares, it makes others angry? Can't you tell that this speech goes against the fabric of nationhood? So is it in line for you to post and amplify everything? So we create these recipes. And even if you don't do it, there are other platforms or the social media that will probably do it that are not controlled. We'd say there's no absolute issue about these protestations. But the issue is where these protestations now become opportunistic, the objectives become political, and people take advantage and look at the way. And let's face it, even Jana, Citizen, said anger in Central. There was so much anger, so much destruction, and that anger, some of it was organized, some of it was opportunistic, some of it was spontaneous. Reason? Somebody has incited them and made them feel victims and victimhood. So everybody comes out. And when umefika kwa kiwanja, when a demonstrator or a person on the field has no aim, you know what a mob does? You become a mob. You know the hardest thing here, if today you are an organized media, kesho mkiwa mob, you'll be surprised how difficult it is to, utajua nani yako na flying kick, nani anaweza piga mtu ngumi ya kumuua. People just become mutated into something different. So I think that's the kind of conversation we're having as a country. Now, if it is, some of this anger is so personal, especially from leaders. When I say personal, I mean from leaders. You see the truthful man speak, he spews hatred. That fellow, mara watu ni shares, mara ni cousins, mara musinue kwa maduka ya watu, mara duka lake lisioperate. By the time you are saying that, it is your own shops that are being looted. The last time, he was telling demonstrators, amutoshika biashara ya mtu hapa. He meant, just a minute, he meant those other demonstrators. Today, he meant the Raila types of demonstrations. Yesterday, people just ran berserk and destroyed businesses in this Nairobi that nobody can remember in modern history of Nairobi, that level of destruction. And even parts of this country, we never anticipated that level of destruction. So mimi nimeshukuru sana. Bye, bro. Ben, Kirui. Jeff, I mean. But they have been reduced by half. But they have been. He says for cabinet secretaries.
2 months later, they see a president appointing more advisors to state house. A president, or the president talks about banning state officers
from contributing 3 months later, we see him, his minister, and some members giving out money in the same announcement that he has done. What do you answer to that? What will be your answer about those questions that you have raised?
I was just telling my friend there from NTV, vigilance, eternal vigilance, is an important cornerstone of our democracy. But where we have issues is come and protest, put pressure on public, on members of parliament, to ensure that state policy is responsive. And as I said, Jeff, if you have an issue politically, there are set constitutional frameworks of how to do it. You can't come saying, sisi tunaenda State House, because the president is not listening to us. I would advise that we shouldn't try that. So, but you have an option on the second Tuesday, or the first Tuesday of August, second Tuesday of August, 2027, to exercise your right. It's not that people don't make mistakes. It's not that anybody is superhuman. It's not that the president himself is Superman. He's a human being. He's prone to mistakes. He's prone to error. He's prone to advice. He listens. He climbs down on bills. He climbs down on certain matters. But the option for you disagreeing with him is not to say you occupy. You only occupy that State House when you win an election. So there are things that we must limit ourselves. The constitutional doctrine of how we change and replace governments is outlined in Kenya's constitution. Sasa wewe ukija Jeff, unamuencourage kijana mdogo ati akuje kuoccupy State House. Alafu anafikiwa na kitu, alafu utakuja hapa wewe Wiper, wewe Chameleon ama Pumpkin, utaanza kutoa statement. You know, ati William Ruto amefanya hivi, na wewe ndio umemwambia akaoccupy. Na wewe ulipokuwa ukiwaambia ukioccupy, niliona unatoa statement kwa Facebook ukiwa Karen. You know, these are the kind of things that we should desist from doing, incitement.
So, thank you very much.
Asanteni sana. It's been a very useful engagement. Thanks for your hard questions, some of you. They were very exciting.